I did not leave. I did not argue. I walked back to my truck with the paper still dry in my hand while rain soaked everything else. The gravel crunched under my boots, sharp and familiar. Behind me, a worker dragged one of my old fence posts into a pile like it was scrap. That sound stayed with me. I drove up the dirt path that cut along the ridge, the same one my father used when he checked the drainage gate every spring. The engine hummed low. Wipers struggled to keep up. Halfway up, I could already see it. The control box sat crooked against the post, paint peeling, vines wrapping around the hinges. Nobody had touched it in years. That was the second crack. I killed the engine and stepped out into wet grass that bent under my weight. The rain hit colder up here. I brushed away the vines with my sleeve and ran my fingers across the metal plate. Still there. Still stamped. Flow Control Access Point 3B. I pulled the key from my pocket. It was old brass, worn smooth on one edge. My father used to keep it on a ring with a piece of red tape so he would not lose it in the mud. I never took the tape off. The lock resisted at first. Then it gave with a dull click that felt louder than it should. Inside, the switch housing and manual gate lever sat exactly where I remembered. Rust on the corners. Grease hardened along the hinge. I did not move it. Not yet. Down the hill, I could hear engines again. More trucks arriving. More materials. They were not slowing down. I leaned against the post and looked out over the development. 12 homes. Fresh roofs. New pavement. Water already collecting in shallow dips along the curb line. The drainage trench they cut was too narrow. Too straight. It ignored the natural slope. I could see it from here. The water wanted to turn. They forced it forward. That kind of mistake does not stay small. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. A man introduced himself as part of the development team. His tone was polished. Controlled. He said they had documentation proving legal transfer. He said any interference with construction would be considered obstruction. I watched a sheet of runoff spill over the curb below and spread across a driveway that had just been poured. Your drainage ties into a controlled flow system, I said. Silence on the other end. Short. Tense. He recovered quickly. Said everything had been reviewed. Approved. Finalized. That word again. I ended the call without answering. The rain eased for a moment, just enough to hear the creek below picking up speed. It was not loud yet. Just faster than it should be. I closed the control box and turned the key back, leaving it in place for a second before pulling it free. The metal felt colder now. On the way down, I passed a temporary sign staked near the entrance. Luxury homes starting in the high 600s. Model open this weekend. Someone had hung balloons on it. They snapped in the wind, bright and out of place. A woman stood near one of the finished houses, holding a clipboard like Margaret's, pointing at the yard as if explaining something to a couple under an umbrella. They were smiling. They had no idea what sat above them. I parked near the edge of the site again and stepped out. The foreman watched me this time. No smile. No shrug. Just a long look. He knew something did not line up. Margaret was on her phone, pacing near the curb where water kept gathering. She looked up when she saw me and gave that same thin smile, like nothing had shifted. But something had. The system above them was still intact, and they had built straight across it like it did not exist. I folded the paper she gave me and slipped it into my jacket. The rain picked up again, heavier now, tapping harder against the pavement and the unfinished roofs. Down the slope, the runoff started to merge into a single stream. It was still small. For now. I stepped closer to the curb where the water kept collecting, watching it gather faster now, thicker, carrying bits of loose gravel and shredded sod with it. It should have spread out across the grade. Instead, it funneled hard into the trench they cut, like someone forced a river through a drinking straw. A worker dragged a hose across the driveway, trying to push the water back, but it kept coming. That was not rain doing that. That was pressure building from upstream. I crouched and ran my hand through it. Cold. Fast. Wrong direction. The foreman walked over, boots sinking slightly in the soft edge of the lawn. He did not say anything at first. Just watched the water the same way I was. Then he asked, low, almost careful, "This supposed to happen?" I shook my head once. No explanation. Not yet. He glanced toward Margaret, then back at the trench, like he already knew the answer was not one he wanted to hear. Behind us, a truck backed up with a loud beep, dropping off more pavers near the model home. They were still building like nothing was changing. That part mattered. The system did not wait for schedules. It responded to flow. Margaret's heels clicked against the pavement as she approached, faster this time. Her smile was thinner now. "We are handling site runoff," she said, not looking at the water, only at me. "You need to leave." I stood up slowly. The rain hit harder again, drumming on the new roofs and turning the fresh dirt into a slick, dark surface. "Your trench is undersized," I said. "And it cuts across a controlled path." She gave a short laugh, sharp and dismissive. "Everything here passed inspection." That word again. Passed. Like a stamp erased physics. A car pulled up near the entrance, tires hissing on wet pavement. A couple stepped out under a black umbrella, looking around like they were seeing their future. The woman smiled at the row of houses. The man pointed at the driveway closest to the curb where the water was already spreading wider. They did not notice it yet. Not fully. But they would. The foreman shifted his weight and kicked at the edge of the trench, breaking a small section where water had started to pool. It rushed forward immediately, faster, deeper, pushing past his boot. He stepped back. That was the third crack. I watched the flow line form across the driveway, cutting a thin path through the fresh surface like it had been there before. Because it had. They just buried it. My phone buzzed again. Same number. I ignored it this time. Margaret followed my gaze to the spreading water, and for a second, her expression slipped. Just a second. Then it snapped back into place. "We have engineers on this project," she said, louder now, like volume could fix it. "Then they should be here," I replied. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of water moving where it was not supposed to move. Down the slope, the runoff from multiple yards started to merge, turning into a single stream that no longer stayed inside the trench. It crossed the curb line and ran along the edge of the street, picking up speed. A worker shouted something near the far house. Another one jogged over with a shovel. Too late for that. The system above them was already feeding into this point, and they had no control over it down here. I took a step back from the curb and looked up toward the ridge where the control box sat hidden behind vines and rust. Everything connected from there. They just did not see it yet. Margaret opened her mouth to say something else, but stopped when the water reached the first garage slab and spread across it in a thin, steady sheet. It was not stopping. Not even close. And it was only getting started. The water crossed the garage slab in a thin sheet, then thickened, spreading toward the front step like it had done this 100 times before. A worker dropped his shovel and backed away, boots slipping slightly on the slick concrete. Another one dragged a bag of sand from the truck and tore it open with shaking hands, pouring a line along the edge like that would hold it. It did not. The stream cut through the sand and kept moving. The sound changed. No longer soft. It carried weight now. A low rush under the steady rain. Margaret stepped back, just one step, then caught herself and straightened. "Fix it," she snapped at the foreman, voice tight. He did not answer right away. He looked past her, up the slope, following the same line I had been watching since I arrived. That was when it clicked for him. Too late. The trench they carved was already overwhelmed, spilling over in 3 separate points now, each one feeding into the street. A car drove slowly past the entrance, tires pushing water outward in shallow waves. The driver leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, trying to understand why a brand new street looked like this. I moved along the curb, tracking the flow. It was not random. It followed an old path, cutting across driveways, bending where the land dipped slightly, ignoring the clean lines they had laid out. They built against it, not with it. That kind of mistake does not forgive. My phone vibrated again in my pocket, constant now. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Same number. Then a message followed. Urgent. Call back immediately. I slipped it away without opening it. Down the row, the couple with the umbrella had stepped closer to the house they were touring. The woman pointed at the water creeping across the driveway. The man lowered the umbrella slightly, watching the line of runoff reach the edge of the garage. Their posture changed. Subtle. Less certain. A sales agent rushed over, talking fast, gesturing toward the sky like the rain was the only cause. It was not. The foreman finally spoke, voice low and rough. "We need to shut something upstream." He did not look at Margaret when he said it. He looked at me. Just for a second. Then away. Margaret caught that glance. Her eyes snapped back to me, sharper now, searching for something she had not needed before. Control. "There is no upstream issue," she said quickly. "This is surface runoff." But the water kept rising along the curb, inch by inch, covering the painted line, reaching the next driveway, then the next. A worker shouted from farther down, pointing at a storm drain that was already backing up, bubbling slightly as it tried to take in more than it could handle. The system below them was choking. The system above them was still feeding it. I stepped back from the curb again, feeling the pull in the air shift. Not wind. Pressure. Everything connected in a line they had buried without understanding. Margaret's phone rang. She answered this one. Her voice changed as she listened. Short replies. Controlled at first. Then clipped. "No," she said. "That is not possible." She turned slightly away, but I could still hear the edge in her tone. Whatever she was being told, it was not part of her plan. The foreman walked toward me, slower this time. "Careful. You said controlled path," he muttered. "What controls it?" I did not answer. "Not here. Not yet." I looked past him, back up the hill where the control box sat behind wet vines and rusted metal, untouched by all of this noise and panic. The rain eased again, just enough for the sound of the creek below to come through clearer, faster now, carrying more volume than before. The street in front of us was no longer dry anywhere. It had become a channel. Margaret ended her call and turned back, but the confidence was thinner now, stretched tight over something cracking underneath. She took a step toward me, then stopped, like she was recalculating. The water reached the second garage slab and did not stop there. It kept moving forward, steady, patient, like it had time. The street turned into a shallow channel, water sliding from one driveway to the next without slowing down. A loose trash can near the curb tipped and drifted a few feet before catching on a mailbox post. Nobody laughed. The sound of the rain blended with the steady rush, like the whole site had found a single rhythm. The foreman stepped closer to the edge, boots half in the flow, and waved 2 workers over. "Sandbags along the lower side," he called, voice tight. They ran, dragging bags that split as they hit the ground, spilling damp sand that the water pushed aside almost immediately. It was not even a fight. Margaret stood near the model home, phone pressed to her ear again, speaking faster now, words clipped. I could not hear everything, but I caught enough. No, the drain is backing up, yes, already, no, it was cleared. She turned slightly, scanning the street, then looked straight at me. Not angry this time. Measuring. A second car pulled in, slower than the first. The driver stopped halfway, unsure whether to continue. Water moved around the tires, shallow but steady. The engine idled. The couple from before stood under the overhang now, watching the driveway darken as water spread across it in a thin, even sheet. The sales agent kept talking, pointing at the sky, then at the curb, then back at the house, trying to keep their attention away from what their eyes already saw. It was not working. The man stepped forward and nudged the water with his shoe. He pulled it back quickly. Cold. Real. I moved farther down the street, tracking where the flow gathered. At the lowest point, the storm drain gurgled, then coughed up a swirl of brown foam. It could not keep up. A worker knelt beside it and tried to clear debris with his hands. Leaves, mud, small stones. The opening stayed half blocked, and the water kept rising around it. That was the choke point. Everything above fed into this one place, and it was already failing. My phone buzzed again. This time a text followed, longer. Legal notice pending. Cease interference. I did not open it. Interference was not what this was. This was consequence. I glanced up the slope again. The line was clear now. From the ridge, through the buried path, across the street, into the drain. They had cut across it at the worst possible angle. The foreman jogged over to me, breathing heavier now. If there is a control, we need it, he said, low, urgent. Now. He kept his voice down, like Margaret could not hear, even though she was only 20 feet away. I met his eyes for a second. He already knew the answer lived above us. He just did not know the cost. Margaret ended her call and walked toward us, slower this time, each step careful on the slick pavement. We have engineers en route, she said, forcing the words steady. This will be handled. Behind her, the water reached the third driveway and did not stop there. It curved, following the natural grade they had ignored, cutting a wider path now. A child's plastic sign near the sidewalk tipped and floated sideways, spinning slowly before catching on a curb. The small things always moved first. The bigger problems followed. The foreman looked at Margaret, then back at me. The question hung there, heavier than the rain. Margaret saw it. Her eyes narrowed slightly. If you are implying something, she said, you can put it in writing. Writing. Paper. Stamps. All of it useless against what was happening under our feet. The drain let out a deeper gulp and failed again, pushing water back onto the street in a slow surge. The line of flow thickened, merging from both sides now. This was no longer surface. Runoff. This was a system trying to correct itself. I slipped my hand into my jacket and felt the brass key press against my palm, warm now from my body heat. Up on the ridge, the control box waited, quiet, unchanged, holding the 1 point none of them had accounted for. The foreman followed my glance. Margaret did too. For the first time, she looked past me instead of at me. The rain eased for a heartbeat, and in that brief quiet, the sound of the creek below came through clearer than before, faster, stronger, pulling everything toward it. I turned slightly toward the path leading up the hill. The decision was not theirs to make anymore. I did not wait for her to say anything else. I turned and started walking toward the path up the hill, boots cutting through wet grass that leaned under the weight of the rain. Behind me, I could hear Margaret call out, sharp and controlled, telling me to stop, telling security to follow. They did not. Not right away. Even they could hear it now. The water had a different sound. Deeper. Heavier. It pulled at everything below. Halfway up the slope, the noise of the sight faded just enough for the creek to come through clearer, faster than it should be for this kind of rain. That was the signal. The system was feeding itself now. I kept moving. The mud stuck to my boots, adding weight with each step, but the path was still there, worn in from years of use. Nobody had blocked it. Nobody had even thought to. Another mistake. I reached the control post and brushed the vines aside again, more force this time. The metal door swung open easier now, like it had been waiting. Inside, the lever sat where I left it, angled slightly forward, locked in place. I rested my hand on it and felt the vibration running through the metal, subtle but steady. Flow. Real flow. Not surface runoff. Not a puddle problem. This was volume moving through a system designed decades ago, a system they had built right over without tracing the lines. My phone buzzed again. I did not look at it. Down below, voices carried up the hill now. Louder. Less controlled. Orders. Questions. A shout about the drain. Another about sandbags failing. I could picture it without seeing it. Water crossing thresholds it was never meant to cross. The foreman's voice rose above the others for a moment, calling for a shutoff that did not exist down there. Only up here. That was the difference. Margaret's voice cut through next, sharper, strained now, demanding updates, asking where the engineers were. Still on their way. Too far. Too late. I tightened my grip on the lever, not moving it yet. Not until it mattered. Timing was part of the system. Always had been. I looked out over the ridge again. From up here, the pattern was clear. The street had become a channel, the driveway's small entry points feeding into it, the trench completely overwhelmed. The storm drain was a choke point, already failing. Everything pointed back to this line, this control, this one place they never accounted for. A car horn sounded below, longer this time, followed by the dull splash of tires pushing through deeper water. That meant it had spread farther than before. I exhaled slowly and eased the lever just a fraction, enough to feel resistance shift, enough to test the response. The vibration changed immediately, a deeper pulse through the metal. Down below, a collective shout rose, sharper this time. Something had moved. I pushed the lever back to its original position and held it there. Not yet. They needed to understand what they had built into. I stepped back from the box and closed the metal door halfway, leaving it unlatched. The key stayed in my hand. The rain lightened again, but the sound of water did not. It held steady, constant, like it had taken control of the entire site. I started down the path, slower now, watching the slope, tracking where the runoff cut new lines through the grass. Each one led back to the same place. When I reached the edge of the development again, the change was obvious. Water covered most of the street now, not deep, but wide, moving with purpose. The couple from earlier stood under the overhang, no longer smiling. The sales agent had stepped back, phone pressed to her ear. The foreman saw me first and moved toward me immediately, face set, no hesitation now. Margaret followed, her expression tight, controlled, but different. She knew there was something above them now. Something they did not own. The question was no longer if it existed. It was what it would do next. The foreman reached me first, breath short, eyes locked on mine like he had already crossed a line in his head. "What did you do up there?" he asked. Not accusing. Not yet. Just needing an answer that made sense of what he was seeing. I did not answer right away. I looked past him at the street. Water now moved in a steady sheet from one end to the other, shallow but wide, reflecting gray sky and half-built roofs in broken pieces. The storm drain near the bend gurgled again, then pushed water back in a slow surge that spread across the asphalt. That was new. That meant the pressure below had caught up. Margaret stepped closer, heels sinking slightly into the softened edge of the pavement. She did not raise her voice this time. If there is a control point, she said, each word placed carefully, you will step away from it. I met her gaze for a second. No anger there now. Just calculation. She knew something existed. She just did not know where it ended. A worker shouted from the far end, pointing toward the lower street where runoff had begun to spill over the curb entirely, cutting into the adjacent lot that had not even been graded yet. Mud streaked across fresh gravel like ink spreading through paper. The system was no longer contained inside their design. It was rewriting it. The foreman followed the line of flow, then looked back at me. That ridge, he said quietly. That is feeding this. He was not asking anymore. I gave a small nod. Once. That was enough. Margaret saw it. Her jaw tightened just slightly. You are interfering with an active development, she said, but the words landed flat against the sound of water moving around us. Interfering implied control. This was something else. I stepped closer to the curb again, watching the flow cut a clearer path across the third driveway. The concrete darkened where the water stayed, a thin line marking a route that had been there long before these houses. You built across a controlled drainage line, I said. It does not shut off down here. The foreman exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across his face, leaving a streak of wet dirt. Then we shut it off up there, he said, more to himself than to me. Margaret turned to him sharply. No one touches anything without authorization, she snapped, the control slipping back into her voice. We have engineers coming. Another horn sounded from the entrance, longer, impatient. The second car had not moved. Water now touched both sides of its tires. The driver stayed inside, watching. The couple under the overhang had stepped back farther, no longer near the edge. The sales agent had stopped talking entirely. Silence from her side said more than anything she could have explained. I felt the key in my hand again, the edges pressing into my palm. Cold now. Grounded. Everything above still fed into that single point. I had tested it. They had heard it. That was enough for now. Margaret took one more step toward me, lowering her voice. You will give me access, she said, like it was already decided. I shook my head once. You do not have it, I replied. The rain eased again, but the water did not. It held steady, thicker than before, pushing across the street with a slow, constant force that did not care about schedules or approvals. The foreman looked between us, then back up the hill. He understood the gap now. What they had built. What they had missed. And what it would take to fix it. The drain near the bend let out another hollow gulp and failed again, sending a wider sheet back onto the street. The flow merged from both sides, covering nearly the full width now. Margaret followed the movement with her eyes, then looked back at me, something sharper behind her expression this time. Not just control. Urgency. The system had already started correcting itself. And it was not finished yet. The water reached the midpoint of the street and did not slow down. It flattened out, then thickened again, like it found a wider path to take. A loose board from a pallet drifted past my boots, bumping against the curb before sliding along with the flow. The sound had changed again. Less rush. More weight. Like something settling into place. The foreman stepped into the street. Testing the depth with one boot. It was still shallow, but it pushed harder now, enough to make him shift his stance. He looked back at Margaret, waiting. She did not give him anything. Her phone was pressed tight to her ear again, voice low, urgent, cutting through the rain in short bursts. We need immediate support. No, it is not contained. Yes, now. She turned away slightly, but her eyes kept flicking toward me. Measuring distance. Measuring options. The couple near the model home moved farther back, stepping inside the garage now as water crept across the threshold in a thin line. The sales agent followed, closing the door halfway like that would keep it out. It would not. The line had already crossed. Down the slope, another shout echoed up. Someone pointed toward the lower lot where the runoff had carved a wider channel through loose gravel, cutting deeper now, exposing darker soil underneath. That was not surface water anymore. That was flow finding its old route. I walked a few steps along the curb, tracking it. Every turn it made matched something buried beneath. A path remembered by the land, not by their plans. The foreman caught up beside me, voice tight. If we do not redirect it, this whole line goes under. He did not need to finish the sentence. We both saw it. Garage slabs. Foundations. Driveways. Everything tied together by the same mistake. Margaret ended her call and stepped forward, closer than before, rain dotting her hair now, breaking the polished look she had walked in with. You are going to stop this, she said, quieter now, but heavier. Not a request. Not yet a demand. Something in between. I looked at her, then back at the street. The water reached the next driveway and spread across it without resistance, filling small dips, pushing debris ahead of it. It was not aggressive. Just constant. That was worse. I did not start it, I said. Her jaw tightened again. She followed my gaze up the slope, past the rooftops, toward the ridge she could not fully see from here. The connection was clear to her now. She just did not have access to it. The foreman wiped his hands on his vest, leaving dark streaks, then nodded toward the hill. We need to go up there, he said. Margaret did not answer immediately. She watched the water push across the street, watched the drain fail again with a hollow sound, watched the edge of the development start to blur under a moving sheet. Then she nodded once. Short. Controlled. Decision made. Fine, she said. We go together. The word together hung there, thin and fragile against the sound of water. I turned toward the path without waiting. Behind me, I heard footsteps follow. Not many. Just enough. The rain eased again as we started up the slope, but the sound below did not fade this time. It stayed with us, steady, like a reminder that the system was still running whether we were ready or not. Halfway up, the foreman slowed, glancing back over his shoulder. The street below looked different now. Less like a road. More like a line drawn by water alone. Margaret kept moving, faster than before, heels slipping slightly in the wet grass but not stopping. She wanted to see it. Needed to. The control point was no longer a question. It was the only thing left. When we reached the top, the metal box sat where I left it, half closed, vines pushed aside. Margaret stopped just short of it, eyes fixed on the rusted door, then shifted to the key in my hand. For the first time, she did not speak right away. The rain paused completely for a second, leaving only the sound rising from below, stronger now, fuller, filling the space between us. She took one step closer to the box and exhaled slowly. Open it. I did not move right away. The key sat in my hand, heavy now, edges pressing into my palm as the sound from below carried up the slope like a steady warning. Margaret stood 2 steps from the box, rain catching in her hair, eyes locked on the rusted door like it held everything she had built. The foreman stayed just behind her, breathing slower now, watching me instead of the water. He understood what this was. Not a switch. A system. I stepped forward and pulled the metal door open the rest of the way. The hinge groaned, low and tired. Inside, the lever sat exactly where I left it, angled forward, locked against a stop that had not been touched in years. Margaret leaned closer, careful not to step into the mud around the post. "What is this?" she asked, quieter now, the edge gone from her voice. I did not look at her. I looked at the mechanism. It controls upstream release, I said. Flow rate into the lower channel. The foreman exhaled under his breath. That was enough for him. Margaret's eyes shifted from the lever to the slope below, then back again, recalculating everything she thought she knew about the site. Then you shut it, she said. This time it was a demand. Clean. Direct. I rested my hand on the lever again, feeling the vibration through the metal, stronger now than before. The system was carrying more than it was meant to at this stage. I could feel it in the resistance. It is already set, I said. This is baseline release. Her head snapped back toward me. Baseline? The word did not fit what she was seeing below. The foreman stepped closer, just enough to see inside the box clearly. If that is baseline, he said slowly, what happens when it is not? I did not answer immediately. Instead, I shifted the lever just a fraction again, enough to change the tension, enough to let the system respond. The metal vibrated deeper, a low pulse running through the frame. Down below, a shout rose, sharper this time, followed by the hollow sound of water pushing harder against something that could not hold it. Margaret turned, looking down the slope, watching the line widen, watching the street blur into a moving sheet. Then she looked back at me, and for the first time, there was no control left in her expression. Only urgency. Stop, she said, stepping closer. Stop it now. I held the lever steady where it was for one more second, letting her hear it, letting her understand the connection between this quiet box and everything happening below. Then I eased it back to its original position. The vibration settled slightly, but the flow did not stop. It never worked that way. Once the system moved, it had to run its course. The foreman nodded once, slow, like something had finally locked into place in his head. Margaret shook her head, almost imperceptible, as if rejecting what she was seeing. This was not in the plans, she said. Not to me. To herself. I closed the metal door halfway again, leaving it open just enough for the hum inside to carry out. No, I said. It was here before the plans. The rain stopped completely now, leaving only the sound from below, stronger than before, filling the space between us. Margaret stared at the box, then at the key in my hand, then back at the slope where her development was being reshaped by something she had never accounted for. The foreman stepped back, giving space, like he already knew the next move did not belong to him. I slid the key into the lock and turned it slowly, the click sharp in the quiet air. Margaret took a breath like she was about to say something else, something bigger, something final. I looked at the lever one more time, then back at her. The system was still running. And it had not reached its limit yet.